Hey, listen, we're wrapping up our series, XO, Love Relationships, in the church this week. And just to recap, man, week one we talked about agape love. And we talked about how just before the ministry of Jesus came into existence, this new Greek word came about, agape. And it was a new kind of love that the world had never known before because it required zero attraction and zero reciprocation. But that's the beauty of the love that Jesus has for us, is that He doesn't ask for anything in exchange. We have a choice. We have a choice to follow Him and accept His goodness and to follow His ways. But He loves us unconditionally, regardless of who we are or where we are or what we've done. And man, I'm thankful for some agape love. The second week we talked about being present. Being present in our relationships is oftentimes one of the most difficult things that we do. But when we look at the love of Jesus and we study the story of Lazarus, we see that just before Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, it's been 4 days. Resurrection seems impossible, but He knows exactly what He's doing, and He knows He's about to perform a miracle. But even in that moment, He stops and He weeps with the sisters because He wanted to be present with them. And His love is present. He loves us in each and every present moment, and it's our job to be present in our relationships, to not look at yesterday or tomorrow, but just to live today. And last week we talked about trading our birthrights. We studied the story of Jacob and Esau, and Jacob, her brother Esau, is the oldest, and he's entitled to 2/3 of the inheritance. And what you got to understand is that their dad's rich, okay? I mean, they're loaded. All right, so this is big money that we're talking about. And he comes in one day at 60 years old. He's been out hunting, and he comes back to his sissy boy brother Jacob. Been at home making some beans. And he swaps his birthright, 2/3 of the inheritance, the firstborn's birthright, for a bowl of beans. I want you to think about that. He traded his fortune for flatulence. Traded his gold for gas. But man, every day we have this decision to make. Are we going to trade our birthright? Are we going to swap out meaningful relationships and agape love and being present for something that's meaningless in our life, something that's temporary? Are we going to control our emotions? And today, we're going to talk about fighting fair. Now, some of you have a perfect marriage, and I understand that, so you didn't fight. You don't fight, and you won't fight. Others of you are a lot more like me and my wife, Kristen, and you occasionally get in a fight, right? And some of you, if you were being honest, you got in a fight this morning before you got to church. The enemy will never fight you like he fights you on the day you're trying to get to church. Isn't that right? Your kids act bad. They never sleep good on Saturday night. They wake up, they spill the juice, they dump a bowl of cereal on the ground, they kick and scream and fuss and fight. He doesn't want you here. He doesn't want you here. And sometimes we get in a fight, but the truth is we all fight. And when Kristen and I very first got married, and I'd shared that story over the first 2 weeks with you guys about how it should have been illegal the way that we got married. We had never lived in the same zip code, much less the same house, much less the same bedroom. We lived 4.5, 5 hours apart from one another the entire time that we dated. And we cram in getting married in the midst of me graduating from law school and moving from Tulsa to Van Buren and studying for the bar exam. And 2 weeks before that, I run to Little Rock, and we get married in all of this haste. And then she comes back and sits at home with nothing to do for 2 weeks because she doesn't have a job. And I don't have a job. We got married on love. That was it. All we had was love. But listen, do you remember when you first get married and you're trying to learn to live together, and the stupid things that you fight over? You see, one of the first things that we got in a big fight over, toothpaste. Who would have ever thought you could fight over toothpaste? You see, but when we got married, and we're sitting in there, and she still brushes her teeth this way, by the way. She has not grown up. Zero maturity there. She turns the water on and never turns it off. Like it's an endless free supply. Her life's just been so full of provision, she doesn't even know you should turn the water off while you actually do the brushing. And do you know where she squeezes the tube of toothpaste from? Right here. Right at that old good spot, right there. and that's about how much she uses while the water's running. Sometimes I think she goes back for seconds. We go through so much toothpaste. And I looked at her one day. I'm studying for the bar exam, all right? Y'all forgive me, okay? We got married 2 weeks before the bar exam. We should not have done that, okay? And I looked at her and I said, would you turn that water off? And she looked at me, and I walked out of the bathroom. But we fight. It's just part of our relationships, right? But what I want us to understand is that we're all going to get in fights. It's just inevitable. But it isn't the fact that we fight that's the problem. It's how we fight. That's the problem. You see, healthy relationships are fighting for resolution. And unhealthy relationships are fighting for victory. There's a huge difference in those two. In fact, John Gottman studied marriages for 16 years, and it's a staggering statistic. He got to the point at the end of 16 years of counseling and studying marriages that he could watch a couple fight for 5 minutes and determine with 91% accuracy whether or not they would end up divorced. Because it wasn't that they were fighting, but it was how they were fighting that made the big difference. Proverbs 27:15, walking on some glass here, says, a quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping on a rainy day. And all the men said, amen. Let me give you ladies one. It's better to have severe hemorrhoids than to live with a husband who is a jerk. 2 Jacob 4:2. I just want to start us off by asking, are you fighting fair? Are you dripping on a rainy day? Or are you a constant jerk? Are you living with agape love? Are you being present in your relationships? Are you trading your great relationship for something meaningless and temporary that doesn't add up to anything? James 1:19-20 says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. We're going to unpack that, and we're going to unpack God's rules for fighting fair. Number one, stop to listen carefully. It says everyone should be, quick to listen. Quick to listen. What that means is your spouse, your coworker, your boss, your kid, your mom, your dad shouldn't have to beg you to listen to them. We should be quick to listen. We should pump the brakes and stop. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I'm absolutely terrible about is coming home, and I live two professions that don't stop. And so inevitably there's texts or there's phone calls or there's whatever, and I have a horrible habit of being in the midst of a conversation with my wife and pulling my phone out to read and respond to a text, and then to continue the conversation as if I was listening carefully. And one day she had all that she was going to play. And she gave me a rule. If you want to text somebody, why don't you just tell me so that I can stop talking and we can pick up the conversation when you're done with your text? Because we're in the midst of these conversations and I'm sending these texts and I'm shaking my head yes. And I have a little bit of a talent in that I can regurgitate what you said to me even though I'm sending someone a text. But even though I can repeat it, I wasn't listening to it. How many of you know you can hear something and not listen? You can be present in a room with someone else and a conversation can be happening and I can be shaking my head. Yes, yes, yes. What? And then what happens is you look up and you ask them a question about what they just said. And they go. See, we got to stop to listen carefully if we're going to fight fair. Proverbs 18:2 says, a fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions. A fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions. What that's saying is the guy that never stops to listen is just a fool. That the one in the relationship that refuses to stop and listen carefully, that refuses to listen on the front end and not the back, is just a fool. Man, we love to talk. We hate to listen. We like to get going in our words. We hate to stop and receive them. I did this counseling course one time. And one of the things that they taught you to teach people that you were counseling is to have them repeat back to one another what the person had just said. And I don't mean in that like sarcastic, smart aleck way, like, yeah, I was listening. You said that Collier has soccer practice Tuesday at 5 and that I have to get him picked up from school. Yeah, I got it. And I don't remember any of that. But to actually stop for just a second and say, hey, so what you're saying is you want me to turn the water off while I brush my teeth? Yes. And what happens when we do that is that we've acknowledged that we're actually listening to the other person, and it validates the feelings. See, what we miss is that we think that the conversation, that the fight, that the fuss is all about the issue. It's about the resolution. But if you'll acknowledge someone's feelings, if you'll take the time to actually listen to what they're saying, repeat it back to them and validate their feelings, you can get to the issue later. You got to get past the feeling first. You got to get past that initial moment when it's rough and it's ugly and everyone's frustrated, and it will only get worse if you refuse to listen. We've got to stop to listen carefully. Number 2 is we have to guard our words faithfully. Everyone should be quick to listen and what? Slow to speak. Quick to listen and slow to speak. Proverbs 21:23 says, watch your tongue and keep your mouth shut, and you will stay out of trouble. That's the New Living Translation. I love that. Watch your tongue and keep your mouth shut, and you'll stay out of trouble. That's pretty true, right? If you'll watch your tongue and keep your mouth shut, you can only get into so much trouble. There's 3 questions that I think that we have to ask ourselves when we're talking about guarding our words faithfully. Number 1 is, should it be said? Number 2 is, should it be said now? And number 3 is, how am I going to say it? Should it be said? Should it be said now? And how am I going to say it? You see, when you're fighting over the toothpaste, and you want to say, if you squeeze that toothpaste from that end one more time. And what I really wanted to say to her was, it's obvious you've never bought toothpaste. Let that water run. You never paid a water bill either. See, that's on the shouldn't be said list. Ever. Those ones should never, ever come out. And then later on in our marriage, as we had matured a little bit, we realized that it was probably just better for us to have 2 tubes of toothpaste at all times, mine and hers. You see, but if I say in the moment when I'm initially mad and we've been married for all of a week and I'm studying for the bar exam, if I say at that time, see, this goes to the should it be said now. If I say at that time, you know what, we should just get our own tubes of toothpaste. That wasn't the time to say that. It would not have gone over well in that moment. See, sometimes the issue needs to wait when there's not a period of conflict. The actual resolution will come later if you'll validate the feeling on the front end. If you'll acknowledge that someone is feeling something and you'll put yourself in their shoes for just a moment, what happens is you're going to get the opportunity to say it. Then you got to ask yourself, how am I going to say it? You see, because one way to say that we should get 2 tubes of toothpaste would be for me to take the 1 tube of toothpaste that we have and to be using it and say, I think you should get your own tube of toothpaste, but I don't have one for you. But that wouldn't be the way to say it, right? The better way to say it is to go to Walmart and buy a 2-pack of toothpaste and to say, hey, babe, I got you your own tube of toothpaste and I got my own because you don't like the way that I squirt my toothpaste and I don't like the way that you squirt your toothpaste and you waste a lot of money and you don't, leave that part out. Should it be said? Should it be said now? And how am I going to say it? Man, we got to fight fair in our relationships if we really want to understand one another and if we really want to treat each other well. Here's some things that you should never do in a time of conflict. You should never do these things in a time of conflict. Number 1 is you should never call names. We all got that one? We all say yes. But you would be amazed at the number of people that sit in my office and break down because they live with somebody or they're close to somebody or because their mom or their dad or their son or their daughter or their cousin, their boss, talks to them and calls them names. Listen, that's not agape love. That's not loving other people unconditionally. That's not loving without attraction. That's not caring about people infinitely. Number 2 is never raise your voice unless it is at your kids. Amen. Number 3 is never get historical. Got to be present. We've covered this one, but we're going to cover it again. Never say never or always. Never threaten an end of a relationship. Whether it's divorce. Listen, if it's time to end a relationship, it's time to end the relationship, okay? Don't use it as a threat, okay? Because when you do, you're introducing an idea of an end of a relationship that sometimes you don't want to introduce. And you never get to what? Put the toothpaste back in the tube. I can't get it back. I tried when we were first married. I'm like, just put some of it back. And it won't go. You only get to say it once. You never get to take it back. And here's the last one, and this is the most important. Everybody get your pen out and your paper. Get your cell phone out if you don't have either one of those. Never quote your pastor during a fight. You got yourself in it, you get yourself out. You got it? I'm not your man at that point in time. I was sharing with the worship team. I'm going to drop it right now. You see, because here's what happens. I get these emails. When that happens. And I tell you what, whenever I retire, I just want everybody to know, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to publish a memoir. And it's going to be nothing but all the emails that were sent to me with names and photos of the people that sent it. So be thinking about what you say in that email. Because it's going to be published. I'll self-publish that memoir. Self-publish that bad boy. It's coming out. Don't quote me in your fight. Number 3, handle your anger righteously. If I could get the team back up, I'm going to start wrapping up. Handle your anger righteously. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Ephesians 4:26 and 27 says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. I love it because what it's saying is, hey, we all get mad. It's not being angry that's the sin. It's anger that leads to the sin. You see, you can be angry in a healthy way. It's possible to be angry and not sin. It's saying, in your anger, do not sin. It doesn't say never be angry. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. You know, you always get that advice when you're getting married of, hey, don't go to bed mad at one another. But when you read it scripturally, the reason that it's saying that is because there's an opportunity for the foothold of sin and the enemy to come into your relationships when you go to bed mad at one another. And there's a really practical reason why you shouldn't do that, because whenever you get in bed and you're mad at one another and you're married, you know the position that gets assumed, the old back-to-back. I'm on this side and you're on that side, and don't you dare let your toe come across that center line, because you ain't getting no toe tonight. You know what I'm saying? And there's 2 kinds of back-to-backers. There's the silent killer. I'm going to sleep over here. And there's the huffer. Kristen's the huffer. Got to go to the bathroom. You asleep? You asleep? You asleep? I learned early on in our marriage that my wife doesn't talk a lot before about 10 p.m. Literally, she just doesn't. And so if you're in a fight with her and you have to resolve it before the 2 of you go to bed, she can talk all night long. And what happens is you're on like day 4 of no sleep, right? Because you can't go to bed. Still mad at one another. Here's the truth. if you'll engage in those conversations, here's what happens. Your heart starts to soften about midnight. I know. 1 a.m., you're right, boo. I'm wrong, and I'm sorry. 2 a.m., whatever you want. We can put that rule on the refrigerator if we need to, but it's true. And when you open up and you begin those conversations and you say, you know what? I'm not going to bed and you're not going to bed. We're going to sacrifice the sleep because you're more important to me than that. We're going to engage in this conversation because I'm not going to go to bed and stew all night, because I'm not going to wake up and let tomorrow be a bad day. And I'm not going to separate from you in the morning and go to work and wonder if you're still mad or what's going on. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to play games with my relationships. They mean far too much. Here are 4 signs that you aren't fighting fair. If you're wondering, if you're just sitting and saying, I don't know. Number 1 is, are you criticizing? And I want to draw a distinction. This is from the same guy that did the study. Criticism versus complaint. A complaint addresses only the specific action at which your partner has failed. A criticism is global. It attacks the person's character or personality. Here's a complaint. There's no gas in the car. I'm aggravated that you didn't fill it up like you said you would. Anybody married to somebody that has never put gas in the car? Leaves the water running. If they leave the water running, they brush their teeth, they don't put their own gas in their car. I'm just going to tell you right now. If you're dating somebody, watch them brush their teeth. You're going to learn a lot. A criticism is you never remember anything. You can't be counted on for your word. It's a global attack of the character. It's not a specific complaint that something didn't get done. Number 2 is you're living in contempt. Contempt is composed of a set of behaviors that communicate disgust. It includes, but is not limited to, sneering, sarcasm, name-calling, eye-rolling, mockery, hostile humor, and condescension. It is primarily transmitted through non-verbal behaviors. Men know what I'm talking about. It does not move toward reconciliation and inevitably increases the conflict. It is always disrespectful. And get this. Research literally shows that couples that display contempt to each other suffer more illness and disease than respectful couples. If for no other reason than your own health, don't treat those around you with contempt. I've never met an unhappy, generous person. Ever. Generous people are happy. If you're giving and you're not living in contempt and you're not constantly beating someone down and being disgusted in the relationships that you live in, I promise you're going to be healthier and you're going to be happier. Number 3 is defensiveness. These are behaviors that convey the message, the problem is not me, it's you. From this position, you imply that because your partner threw the first stone, they're responsible for the entire conflict. You avoid taking responsibility for your own behavior by pointing to something they did prior to their complaint about you. You do not acknowledge that which is true in what they are saying about your behavior. It's easy to be defensive. I'm a defensive guy. I get my feelings hurt probably easier than they should. I know it makes no sense because I was a lawyer, but I do. I get defensive quick. The last one is stonewalling. In relationships where intense arguments break out suddenly and where criticism and contempt lead to defensiveness and where more contempt leads to more defensiveness, eventually one partner tunes out. This is the beginning of stonewalling. The stonewaller acts as if he couldn't care less about what the partner is saying or doing. He turns away from conflict and from the relationship. Any form of disengagement can be stonewalling. Silent treatment, not okay. It's not okay, right? Listen, are you loving with agape love? Are you present in your relationships? Are you trading the great parts of your relationship for something as meaningless as a bowl of beans? Are you fighting fair? And there's not a person in this room that can't get better at relationships. There's not one person, including myself, that can't get better when it comes to relationships. And you say, okay, how? And listen, we jetted through all this because I want us to just take a little bit of time and I want us to understand something. we model our relationships after Jesus. And our relationship with Jesus is number one. And when we're walking in meaningful relationship with Jesus, it's really hard to be bad at relationships in our individual lives. And you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And many of us in this room are living in relationships where we're constantly saying, I just want it to go back. I just want the toothpaste to get back in the tube. But when you look at Jesus and the way that He reconciled us to Him, it had nothing to do with putting the toothpaste back in the tube. You see, what came out of you that didn't need to be in you doesn't need to go back in you. Come on. I need to say that again. Some of you didn't get it. What came out of you that didn't need to be in you doesn't need to go back in you. What came out of your relationships that doesn't need to be in your relationships doesn't need to go back in you. And here's the great news. You see, our God is a God of all things new. He's not a God of putting the toothpaste back in the tube. He's present. He loves with agape love. He's not saying, hey, you messed up yesterday and I got to get that part and we got to fix. No, He says, you know what? When you come into me, it's a new creation. You're made whole and you're made new. He says, you know what? Take this raggedy old tube of toothpaste that your wife messed up and get rid of it, because there's a brand new tube for you. So if I'm walking in relationship with Jesus and I'm walking in a relationship that says I don't care about putting the toothpaste back in the tube, I just need a new tube. I need a new perspective. I need a new relationship. I need new agape love. I need to be present today and forget about tomorrow and forget about yesterday. I need to start fighting fair win, and now you do it through prayer. That's how we build a relationship with God. So listen. They're going to sing a song. And it's 11:55, man. We're smoking. We've got time to just find a spot up here. Kneel at your chair, stand and pray. But listen, if you can't take 10 minutes and give it to Him, stop asking Him to fix it. And if you can't take 10 minutes and say, I'm not going to worry, this is a safe place. I've said it before, but it's been a long time. Listen to me. The one thing that will get you to you can mess up as much as you want in this world. The one thing that will get you across my desk and a disinvitation to this place is the moment that you disrespect somebody trying to enter into a real relationship with Jesus. That's the only thing. That's the only thing. This is a safe place. And we've got to enter into God's presence and say, I want agape love. I want to be present with you now, Jesus, because that's the only way that I'm going to stop trading out the meaningless things for a bowl of beans, and it's the only way that I'm going to start fighting fair. So listen, man, as they sing this song, find your place, and let's give it all to God. Amen?